Mike D, how in the heck are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Matt.
Mike, let's start. We got so much to delve into with free agency and all the move the Saints have made since we talked last Thursday. Let's just go chronologically in what they did starting last Friday with Emmanuel Sanders, and then we'll sort of make our way down. So you're a guy, Mike, who said all along that the Saints were going to go get a receiver in veteran free agency. What do you think about the guy they got?
Well, he was the guy that Sean wanted actually mid-season. He just couldn't come up with the deal. And 49ers actually gave up quite a bit to get him for half a season. And Emmanuel's a really good football player. And I get it. He's 32 years old. It's a rent player, but it's a good rent player for 2 years. And there's a guy that, 5 of the last 6 years, he's caught 60 passes or more in a season. The Saints don't have anybody close to that. And you see him today. He came into the league from SMU. He was a speed guy, tremendous foot speed. And he has developed into a really good route runner throughout the years. It's his run-after-catch skills, Match, that's really, really good. And you watch him even last year, his ability to catch a little pass and, 8-9 yards downfield. He shakes a tackler, and then he's up the field. So he's still plenty fast, and he gives you that number 2 option that he's legit in that category. So I think the fit is just right for him with this football team. And look who you have at quarterback. Emmanuel Sanders today, he's a guy that he knows how to work that short intermediate route. Isn't that what your quarterback throws the best?
Yes, indeed.
So, he's a perfect fit for what you want to do. It does not take wide receiver off the board in round 1 for you, but it gives you some options. Because, again, you're talking about a 32-year-old receiver. But you give him immediate help, and what that tells you again, they've taken the poker chips and thrown them all in the middle of the table.
Mm-hmm.
All in.
Mike, so if you would elaborate a little more, though, on what this means for the draft, because a lot of people seem to ask that question as a very natural follow-up.
Well, it does nothing for your draft. But it doesn't put wide receiver as I got to get it in round 1, understanding the fact that you don't have a second-round pick. This is the thickest draft class I've ever done at wide receiver. And I think you're going to have guys 3rd, 4th, 5th round that are going to end up being really good starters in this league. But it takes it maybe not off the priority list, but it takes it off being the number 1 thing on it. And it gives you options at this point. And when Sean brought this up in the offseason about I watch what Kansas City does and San Francisco does, and we got to get faster. I think a lot of people thought that immediately. That's what he meant. We're going to go after a fast receiver, or maybe get another fast back, whatever. Also, too, what it meant, I told you this time, also, too, you got a defense against those guys. So you got to have guys on the defensive side that can defend against those receivers and tight ends and everything else of what a team like a San Francisco and Kansas City bring to the table. And so right now, and I have not finished it yet, but it's close, cornerback and linebacker would be on top of the list for me. I still think this football team needs a young corner. Again, Janoris Jenkins, I think you could put him in that category similar to Emmanuel Sanders, in that he's a guy that for 2 years, and he sort of stepped off the street and he came in, hey, I'm the starter. I'm beating out everybody here. And exactly what he did. But again, with his age, I think you would look to get a little bit younger there. And certainly at linebacker, you look at the numbers, they just aren't there. And I want a guy that can play 3 downs. I can find a guy that can rush off the edge, but he has no experience or very little in the coverage part of the game. I can find a linebacker that can stop the run, but how well does he match up in the coverage part where tight ends are whizzing right by him? It's supply and demand. There aren't a lot of those guys out there. And if you're talking about round 1, there are 2 of them. And one of them's right there in your backyard.
Yep.
And that's Patrick Queen, and the other one's Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. And so that's why I think in the 20s, that's where you're going to see these teams look around and say, I got to match up. And when you can get a linebacker that can play the 3 downs, man, that's worth gold today, because you're not finding a lot of those guys. Because if he can't cover, then he has got to be able to be a great blitzer. You've got to use him in that spot. So, and both Queen and Murray can do that. They can blitz also, but their ability to cover is noticeable. So, I think that's why. I think a lot of people are going to look in that area. If you had to do it today, I think most people would lean. Now, when I said that a month and a half ago, a lot of people, man, why you got a linebacker in round 1? I did look at this roster, and you can tell me, well, okay, when we get Kiko Alonso healthy and we get Alex Anzalone healthy, I get it, and both are good players, but it's to keep them healthy.
Mike, speaking of Janoris Jenkins, and we'll come back to the draft stuff in a bit, but I want to make sure we're checking all the boxes on the free agent stuff. What do you think of the deal that they gave Jenkins? Not just avoidable years, but extending him 2 years beyond this one as well.
Yeah, I do know that they like him a lot. And I think, he just comes in here. He's never been a backup in his life. I mean, come on, Jack Rabbit. From his junior high school days on, he ain't never been a backup. And he's not being a backup on this team either. And so I think that's what they think of him, to give him that type contract that can keep him around a few more years. He's a veteran. He is a bit of a guesser at the cornerback position. And he gets beat sometimes, but he also makes a lot of big plays too. And so I think this is the bridge. And you never have enough good corners. Never. Not in this league. When you've got to be able to match up. I think Dennis Allen made this comment to me last year that they out of base coverage like 77% of the time. So that means 3 corners. You 3/4 of a starter, the third corner. So one way or another, you knew they were going to keep Jenkins around. I mean, I think he's a guy that Sean Payton likes a lot. And you just think about it, he just came in for a handful of games last year. He's like a free agent acquisition for you. He really is. A lot of people aren't counting that because of what happens, but he really is like another free agent because you just had him late in the season for a few games.
Do you expect him to be on the roster for the next 3 seasons?
If you ask me 2, I would say, yeah. I don't know about that third.
So
again.
No, go ahead.
That's part of the game you play with the finances. But I think for the next 2 years, yeah.
So I guess
we worry about the third season when the third season happened. My thing about it is, and you've heard me say, man, you can only play for a championship the one you're playing for this year. And I'm not worried about no 2022. Man, listen,
we know the Saints aren't either, Mike. They'll keep kicking that can down the road, man.
Yeah, I just keep kicking them. Man, listen, I might not be around for 2022. I want him around for 2020. So my thing about it is, you can worry about that financial stuff that third year down the road, and that's going to come in play. And we all know the salary cap is going to continue to grow up and go up and go up. Once they sign this new deal with the networks, man, you're going to see just, because I still got some people that, that they upset about the Nielsen, and they're still upset about all that. And, the NFL is going down the drain. Really? You took a look at them ratings? Wait till they sign that new TV contract and see how much money the networks are willing to pay them to put this on TV. And I think it's, you can see inevitably just how much the NFL and even college football moving around, so to speak, in some edges of how much they think of what football means to people in the States, and they're willing to watch it. Now, for some people, it's part of their gambling habit. Let's not beat around the bush here. Some people like to put coin on them games, and that's their major interest in life. And it's easier to gamble now than ever before. And for some people, they love the game, or they pull for their teams or players or whatever if you got a fantasy football team. So there's a lot of elements rolling here with the NFL. But, I worry about that third year of Jenkins when it happens.
Mike D, by the way, M&D draft report, is it going out? Has it been interrupted by all this? What's the latest?
It goes to print early next week, and so we just hopeful
I
that
hear you, man.
everything's on time.
I hear you.
With everything, but we'll have it out. The first week or so of April, it'll be in that range. So hopefully we get no delays, but it doesn't look that way so far.
You can go to MikeDetillier.com. Can you pull this up, Paul, so the audience can see? This is the homepage of MikeDetillier.com. You can see right there, pre-order the M&D draft guide. It's just buy now. Hit that, click right there on that link, and they'll take you right to the page to go buy. So you can get to MikeDetillier.com to go buy it right there. All right, Mike, let's talk Andrus Peat. He can afford a lot of your draft guides. None of us thought, Mike, that he was going to be back in New Orleans, yet here we go. So what did you make of what happened, what transpired that kept Andrus Peat in New Orleans?
It's the biggest surprise of the offseason, because when the season ended, even before, if you talk to people in the organization and players and former players and everything else, there was no one that thought he would return. No one. Now, you might beat your chest and say, well, I thought he would. Come on.
I haven't found that person, Mike. Nobody has said it publicly anyway.
I'm still looking for that one, but I'm sure that they'll have somebody that says I knew he'd be back. Again, I thought he would get this sort of deal, but not with the Saints. And it is sort of a supply and demand situation. And I think the Saints had their eyes on a couple guys, and both of them came off the market quickly. Once the Patriots tagged Joe Tunney, he got kind of taken off the market a little bit. And then Graham Glasgow, who's a guy with the Lions, who signed very quickly with the Broncos. He was the next. And then I think the heavy hand of Sean Payton came in. Hey, you know what? If we were going to pay this type of money to those guys, let's keep what we got. Let's keep Andrus. And I think there's no doubt about it in my mind that that's sort of what happened here. And I think he likes continuity. And when you got a 40-year-old plus quarterback to protect him, I thought Andrus played better in 2018 than in 2019. I thought he had more struggles last year than he did the year before, where I thought he really played well when he was healthy. He's a guy that every year has a nick and a scrape, and so you understand he's going to have some downtime. He's also your backup left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that adds to the value of him as a player. And he's a good player, okay? Man, I've heard people, he's not good. No, he's a good player in this league. You paid him like a better than a good player.
Yeah.
But the supply and demand just didn't afford you any other spot. And I think, again, it keeps your continuity up front, especially on the blind side of Drew Brees on the left with Teron Armstead and now with Andrus. Now, the money value is high.
Yeah.
And so that part, I think, is the biggest surprise of it all. Not that he didn't get it, but that he would get it here. That's the biggest surprise of everything, is that I'd always thought he'd get this sort of deal, but it wouldn't be with the Saints. It would be with someone else.
Mike, when we look at other free agent news, I pulled up this tweet. It's your tweet from 2016. This would have been, I went and looked it up, Mike. This was...
Man, that's a long time ago, man.
Well, I remember you and I talking about it so much. I went and searched and I found it. January 26, 2016, you wrote, biggest X factor on D in the 2016 draft, Eastern Kentucky's Noah Spence, Justin Houston type OLB, outside linebacker, but off the field issues. You loved him before the draft. No, Sean Payton loved him. They got him late last year, but for 2 games, he was never after the injury to Davenport, but he was never active. What's a realistic expectation for a guy like Noah Spence this year for New Orleans?
As a rotational guy, and I think Sean relies on his assistant coaches a lot about, give me intel on him, okay? Give me the intel. And so he's a guy that they re-signed. That's because Ryan Nielsen wants him here.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan sees the athletic ability in Noah Spence, and that was never a question about his athleticism. He had some injuries, certainly early on with Tampa, but his ability to get off the snap and get you a pass rush, he's always had that skill set. He was one of the most highly recruited football players in the country.
Yep.
People forget he actually started at Ohio State, but he got in trouble there enough that, man, he must have really been in trouble that they kick him off the Ohio State team. At that point, man, you'd have really had to have been doing some bad stuff. And then he dominates in the smaller college game. But, man, he just never has been able to piece it together as a technician. He's always been sort of a one-trick pony with the speed element. And so this is just my opinion on it. I think Ryan sees a guy that he can work with from a technical standpoint and have him as part of the rotation at defensive end. I know they like really Granderson also.
Yeah.
And when you look at how he's built, man, he looks like a long, tall guard in basketball. I mean that's how he's built to me. I mean, he's got no meat on the bone.
Right.
I mean, he's a guy that's really thin. Noah's a little bit more filled out, not quite as tall, but putting pressure on the quarterback is a premium. And when you start to pull your starters, and when you're trying to give them a little bit of rest time, if it's a Cam Jordan or if it's a Marcus Davenport, I think what Ryan sees is a guy that maybe can help us here as part of that rotation and being able to influence the quarterback, because I think that is becoming such a huge part of the game. The other thing, too, is where are they today? I can find you a ton of inside players that they still have coming out of the college ranks. Find me the edge guys and how quickly they peel off the board to come draft day. So I think that's what they're looking at for him, that he could be part of that rotation as a backup defensive end and give you some edge pressure. And guess who's in the NFC South today?
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
I'm with you, man.
So you know what? That to me is already, you can see the influence of Brady here, where the Saints are, okay, you get Brady, but let us do a few things in the secondary. Bringing in Malcolm Jenkins, re-signing DJ Swearinger, redoing the deal with Janoris Jenkins. We bring in Noah Spence, re-sign David Onyemata. Okay, yeah, you wanted to keep those guys, but in the back of your mind, isn't that if we got competition in the NFC South, now they're no longer pretenders. They're contenders.
Yep.
And we got to do something to influence Tom Brady one way or another, because we got to play him twice a year.
Mike, I love it. I went and looked this up the other day. 4 years ago in 2016, the Saints defensive ends were Cam Jordan, Paul Kruger, Darryl Tapp, and Kasim Edebali. That was it. And now they got 6 guys, man. And I love the potential of Spence and Granderson. I wanted to run this by you, see if this made sense. Like, I have this idea, maybe just because of what we saw with Nick Fairley, right? He floated around the league in less than ideal spots. He finally landed in a spot where they said, hey, go do what you did in college. Get in the gap and just blow people up. And he was awesome in New Orleans. Like, I look at Spence, Granderson, and think those are like low-risk, potential high-reward guys that if it clicks in the right spot, you could have an impact guy.
And if it doesn't work out?
Yeah, it costs you nothing.
It costs you virtually zilch. Also, too, man, I think the world of Ryan Nielsen as a coach. And his technical skill set is so good. And I think in the next few years, he's going to get a chance to be a head coach somewhere. It may not be in the NFL. It may start in the college ranks. But, man, it goes to show how good of a coach he is. And you look at the development since he's been here, and that he's been able to elevate Cam Jordan's game. Before Rankins got hurt, look at his development as a player.
Sure.
I think if Marcus Davenport can stay healthy, I think you would see the same thing. And yet, he goes out and finds a guy like Shy Tuttle. And he told me the story in the summer. He was trying to recruit Shy Tuttle. He was a North Carolina guy, and he was at North Carolina State at that time. He was the defensive line coach, but also the recruiting coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So I do know one thing: when you're a recruiting coordinator, you take a long look at those defensive linemen, man. Because I know a guy that's a head coach here that did the same thing, who mentored Ryan. So they sort of cut from the same cloth in that mode. And he couldn't get him to go to State, and then he ends up in New Orleans. But that connection got Shy Tuttle here with the Saints. And what he did with Shy as a undrafted rookie last year, and look the significant playing time he had. So I agree with you. I think the Noah Spence thing is, I think Ryan sees something in him athletically that he can work with from a technical standpoint and get him to be a solid backup player. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't cost you much.
The XFL's leading interceptor, Deatrick Nichols, has signed with the New Orleans Saints. What can you tell us about him?
Well, he's a guy that sort of bounced around a little bit getting into the NFL. Didn't make it. The XFL was a good spot for him. What's interesting, this was, I think, back in January. Oh, it had to be early February. We had June Jones on with us.
Okay.
And the first guy he brought up before P.J. Walker was, guess who? The corner. He said, man, listen, I don't know how he's not playing in the NFL. And he said, he is really good. And so he was the first one to sort of give the hint that this guy could possibly play in the NFL. Now, it's a totally different league, it's a totally different world. And he's sort of the depth that you're going to bring in at the cornerback position. And we'll see how it goes with him. He's got some skills. He's a ball hawk. Now, a lot of times he's a guy that will bite on a double move. Haven't watched him. That was the one big negative. A guy gives him a double move, he bites on that first one real hard. So he's going to have to try to break that at the NFL level. Again, in the XFL, though, he was impressive. They weren't pressing him off the corner. And he did a nice job of jamming the receivers and getting them off their routes. And he was running the route for the receiver better than they were. So he's a maybe. He's a maybe prospect. But, hey, based off of what you saw in a short glimpse in the XFL, he was impressive. But June Jones, who had his coaching this league a long time, he was the first one. He brought it up to us one Monday night that he thought he was a guy that could play at the NFL level.
Interesting. Well, he's going to get a shot in New Orleans. The other news, Mike, is we found out Vonn Bell's going to Cincinnati, and we knew his days in New Orleans were done when the Saints brought back Malcolm Jenkins. What surprised me was the contract number. Malcolm Jenkins ended up getting a bigger deal with New Orleans than Vonn Bell got with Cincinnati. What do I make of that?
This sort of reminds me of what happened with Kenny Vaccaro years ago. Kenny went in, and I think he wanted a deal that was like $8 million a year that it would have averaged to. The Saints tried to deal with Kenny and his agent. It didn't work out. And Kenny sat for a long time before he finally signed on with the Titans for, I think it was right around $5 million a year, which was not as much as what the Saints were offering more than that at that stage. And with Vonn, the biggest surprise isn't the contract. It's that he signed with the Bengals. That, to me, was the biggest surprise of it all. Now, the Bengals have started to shell out a few dollars, I should say, in free agency. And I like Vonn a lot. I think he's a good football player. Where he excels at is in run support. He was the intimidator back there in the secondary. He's a guy that started to create some turnovers because he was a big hitter. And his awareness skills were good. He has gotten better in the coverage part of the game, but you can see he's better in the box than he is out, one-on-one in the man coverage situation. So this is a situation, and this is not the first time we saw it. A little bit last year with Mark Ingram. We saw it a few years back with Vaccaro. But this sort of mirrors Kenny Vaccaro's situation where, the agent puts a certain price, value price on him. The Saints had spoke to Vonn. They wanted him back. And once he said no, and Jenkins all of a sudden becomes available, the guy with the chalk in his hand said, "We going with Jenkins."
Yeah, interesting, man. Mike. It's similar, I guess, to what happened with Mark Ingram last year too. Wanted more.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's got some similarity, but the Vaccaro deal to me is even more similar because he wanted upper echelon money to play safety. And if you look at Vonn and you look at Vaccaro, their strengths are similar. Kenny was never great in the coverage part of the game. He was okay there, but he was never great there. What he was good in is coming up the seam, making that tackle, playing in the box. They used him a lot when they would take out a linebacker and they would put him in there. And so their game is somewhat similar, but the agent sort of overpriced it. You know, this happened a few years back with Tyrann Mathieu. That I think Tyrann thought he would get a lot more money out on the free agent market than he did. He had to wait a year, and then the Chiefs paid him the money. But he had to sort of wait that year to get it. And so the biggest surprise for me that Vonn signed with Cincinnati. And people say, well, he's a Cincinnati guy. No, he's not. You know, he was born in Tennessee, and he grew up in Georgia. He went to Ohio State, but he's not an Ohio guy. Just because you go to Ohio State, you look where the Bosa's are born at. You know, they're in Florida. They're Florida guys. So again, Ohio State does have those tentacles. They can go out and get people from other spots.
Mike, I got to ask one more question. Then we'll break. We'll get to listener questions. But I've been hypothesizing about this all week. And I've gotten some people that agree with me and some that criticize. I'd love your thought. Saints need a backup quarterback. I say Jameis Winston. You kick the tires if he's affordable. What do you make of that idea, or what the Saints might do to back up Drew Brees?
I would have no issue with that. Now again, money's going to come into play.
Oh, Mike! I'm gonna go flex on everybody on Twitter now, bruh. I got Mike D in my corner now. What you want, Jameis haters?
No, because here's the thing. Sean spent a lot of time with Jameis Winston before he got picked. And Sean is a little bit like Peyton Manning. You know, you there with him, you're in a comfortable setting. And, man, tell me what you do best and what you don't. Eli Manning told me that about Peyton. Man, look at these guys. They're spilling their guts to him. They're telling him everything. And he says, I'm just telling you, one day he's going to use it against them. He's going to be in a position where he's going to use it against them one way or another. And I think Sean's like that to work out quarterbacks. I want to find out a little bit. But he spent time with Winston, and he's seen him, having played him twice a year. I would have no issue with that. None. Now, I think he's going to get a better deal somewhere else. I think if you look at it, the best connection to me would be Pittsburgh. Because of the fact Roethlisberger's coming off the surgery with his elbow. We all saw what Pittsburgh had at quarterback once Big Ben went down. Yeah. And, you know, that might be a landing spot for a year. And if I'm Winston, I'm signing a one-year deal with whoever.
Bingo.
And then I'm going to throw myself back out on the free agent market again. But he sort of, you hear the music and which chair are you going to hit? Now, again, it's like that for Cam Newton. Andy Dalton sort of stuck in purgatory with the Bengals. And so where are you going to land in the draft puts you now 3-4 more guys. Where you know where the first three are going to go pretty quickly. I think what all this is setting up is a big drop for Justin Love.
Jordan Love from Utah State or Justin Herbert?
Utah State.
Okay.
I think what happens with him now, because you can see with Burrow and Tua and Justin Herbert, those guys are going to go in the top 5-6 players. What happens with Love? And does he start to take that tumble similar to Aaron Rodgers when he took his, or Brady Quinn when he started to take his? I think that you're looking at that, and some team, I think, will eye up what happens with Love. What if he gets into the 20s? And we talked about this a couple of days ago doing TV. What happens if he's there at 2021? Do the Saints look in the future and say, you know what, we like him enough, let's go get him? I think that may be a big storyline. If he gets past 15, 16, 17 picks of teams that really don't need a quarterback today, but are looking in the future for tomorrow, and Love becomes available, how much do you love Love?
Would he be a guy for New England, a spot ahead of New Orleans?
I would think that he would certainly be different from what New England's had.
Yeah.
But, listen, Belichick is a guy that is adjustable. at that point. The other team, too, is Jacksonville, which I think picks at 20. I mean, I think a lot of Gardner Minshew, but is that your future, Gardner Minshew at quarterback? You would have to look at that. And so I think there may be some maneuvering here if he starts to take that run that we've seen in the past with a quarterback. And there's always somebody. We saw it with Lamar.
Yeah.
Just a few years back, Lamar Jackson, he's the last pick in round one. You had everybody, him going in the top 20 picks, and all of a sudden he's still there. And Ozzie Newsome and his last gift to the Ravens before he retires, he makes that deal.
That's right.
And you would figure, that's Ozzie, because I think he goes down not as one of the greatest tight ends of all time, which he is, but he's one of the best GMs in this business, keeping that franchise afloat all those years through quite a number of different head coaches.
Mike, where does Cam end up?
I think the best case for him would probably be out west.
Really?
With the Chargers.
Not Washington with Rivera?
No. Once they traded for Kyle Allen, that was it.
Okay.
Because basically what Ron has already said now is this is Haskins' team. Now, I'm sure the owner told him, listen, I'm the guy that wanted Haskins here. He's going to be the quarterback, right? Yes, sir, Mr. Snyder. Yeah, Dwayne's the starter here. And so that's why they went and traded a fifth-round pick off for Kyle Allen, someone he knew very well. If he didn't make that trade, then it would make a lot of sense. But he's not also signing Cam Newton.
Yeah, it makes sense.
At that point in time. Now, the other thing is, and my neighbor Joe Clark, he brought this up to me. He said, wouldn't you wait? Wouldn't you wait maybe to the summer? And he said, it sounds awful, but, something's going to happen to somebody, injury-wise or whatever, and you sitting out there. And so would a one-year deal with the L.A. Chargers make sense? No, come on, you can't convince me with Tyrod Taylor. And even if you pick Herbert, I think he's a guy that you would maybe want a red shirt like Mahomes for a year. I think that would be a perfect spot for Cam.
All right, Mike, we got a ton of questions, as is always the case this time of year, so let's get to it. Craig, via email. Mike, what about Michael Kendricks or Nigel Bradham to the Saints? Can they afford him? Would they fit in the scheme?
You could afford them. I mean, listen, they're not holding up the bank with what they're asking for. So I think it would just be the right fit for him. The one thing with Nigel, he's played across the board. He's been a weak side linebacker, a strong side guy, played in the middle. But don't you have a guy like that in Craig Robertson already?
Yeah. So a really good special teams guy too.
Yeah. So, what I would want is a starter that also can cover. Okay, and that has not been either one of the two guys' strength, to be honest.
Here's one from Mark. Ask Mike, how much will Mike Nolan's presence be missed on the defensive side of the ball?
Listen, that's a good question, and I've been asked that before. I think a lot. Mike was like a junior defensive coordinator. He brought a lot to the table, and he got the very most out of his linebacking core. He did a fantastic job there. I think it's going to be really missed there. Here's a guy who was a former head coach. He's been around this league. He's well-connected. And people had so much respect for Mike. I remember Dave Aranda come to the Saints facilities, and he would watch for a couple of days out there. And I asked him, I said, who are you watching here? He said, Mike Nolan. He said, I just love the way he coaches linebackers. And, it was Dave Aranda. Isn't that his forte, to coach linebackers?
Yeah.
And that's what he was watching at the Saints camp. He was watching Mike Nolan. No, it'll be missed a lot.
Charlie on Twitter asked Mike, we know the Saints love trading during the draft. Do you expect them to be actively looking to trade up again this year?
I'm going to say trade, yes. Because, that's part of what Sean does.
Yeah.
I mean, he loves that maneuvering around come draft day. Now, I've heard him say this twice about this is a thick draft. The more picks we could get, the better off we'd be. Isn't he sort of telling you that maybe for the first time he's sort of thinking about maybe dealing down? Now, I've heard him say it twice, and I do listen to him pretty well. I've not heard him say that before. about, I would like to have more picks and that sort of thing. So if he's talking about more picks, you would have to look at a maneuver somewhere to grab you extra picks. So I'll answer the question, yes, that I think the Saints will be active with trades. But for the first time, and it's never been part of the history with Loomis and Sean to trade back, I think that they will take a look at that, especially for a team looking for a big offensive lineman.
Interesting.
I think that part of sitting at 24 still gives somebody in the early part of round two, an opportunity to deal up, and you deal back and maybe get you a couple of picks or an early round pick that you don't have a second. So what happens if you could get a second and a third? Well, wouldn't you do that? You sort of getting the same guy at 24 as you would at maybe 34.
Interesting. It's an interesting scenario. It would be unprecedented for Peyton and Loomis. We know that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Ask Mike, will Patrick Queen be there for the Saints to draft in round one?
If I go to the print now, I'm going to tell you no. I have him off the board. I have him off the board when the Saints pick at 24.
Okay. What about Murray?
I have him there when they pick at 24.
Okay, all right. Hey,
I'm not. Listen, I'm not going to beat around the bush. If today they say you got to go to print with it, it's Murray.
Okay, Mike. If either one of those two guys is on the board at 24 and the Saints take him, I'm pumped. I think most Saints fans would be.
Too.
They recognize the need and how good those two players are. They're versatile. Yeah.
Both of them have played in the middle and on the outside. And so how many guys you can get like that? Again, it comes down to supply and demand, and that there's not a lot of guys that can play the run well, can drop back in coverage, can blitz when you ask them to, and are versatile. They fit what the Saints want their linebackers to do. And so I would be thrilled with either one.
Chris Jarrell asked Mike, if Eric Reed's willing to move to linebacker, should the Saints take a chance on him?
Come back again?
If Eric Reed is willing to move to linebacker, should the Saints take a chance?
I know Eric wanted to come back to New Orleans. And I know at one time Sean thought a lot of Eric Reed. But, he's going to play safety. He's going to be a strong safety in this league. And the Saints had an opportunity with Eric last year if they wanted to bring him in. But and I do know Sean likes him a lot, because he liked him when he came out of LSU quite a bit.
Mike, like 20 seconds. There's 100 questions in here about free agent linebackers. Any free agent linebackers that the Saints might target?
I don't see any.
Okay.
I'm not saying they won't sign one, but I don't see a guy that really sticks out to me.
He's Mike Detillier. Y'all get to MikeDetillier.com. Order the M&D draft report. I'll go tweet out the link right now. We'll share it on the Facebook page as well. SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network there at Sports Illustrated, and with us every Thursday. He is the one and only Mike D. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you as always, man.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it, buddy.
Be well.